The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the diplomatic station as Ambassador Diane Martinez of Earth pressed her back against the cold metal wall. Alarms blared throughout the massive space station that served as the meeting point for the Galoran Alliance, a coalition of 17 alien species that had maintained peace in this sector of the galaxy for over 300 years. "They came out of nowhere," whispered Paul Garcia, the lieutenant assigned as Diane's security detail. His hand rested on his sidearm, though both of them knew the small weapon would do little against the attackers currently boarding the station. Diane nodded, her dark hair falling across her face as she peered through a viewport at the battle, raging outside. Sleek alien ships with glowing purple engines, the Vex Horde, swarmed around the station, firing energy weapons that cut through the diplomatic station's minimal defenses like they were nothing. "Ambassador Martinez," a voice chittered from the shadows. Ambassador Catharix of the insectoid Peloran species emerged, her four arms gesturing frantically. "We must reach the emergency shelters. The station's outer hull has been breached in 3 sectors. Paul checked his tablet, which still managed to connect to the station's damaged systems. "She's right. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the Vex reach this level." Around them, diplomats from across the galaxy huddled in frightened groups. Many had never experienced violence firsthand. The Galoran Alliance had been at peace for so long that most species had forgotten the horrors of war. Humans, as the newest members of the Alliance, were among the few who still maintained a military. "The communication array," Diane said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the corridor. "Has anyone called for help?" Ambassador Zul, a tall, blue-skinned diplomat with silver eyes, shook his head sadly. "The Vex destroyed our long-range communications as their first target. No distress call could be sent." Diane exchanged a meaningful look with Paul. Without a word, they changed direction, moving, away from the group heading to the shelters. "Where are you going?" Catharix called after them. "The safe rooms are this way." "We'll catch up," Diane called back. "There's something we need to do first." Paul and Diane raced through the twisting corridors of the station until they reached a small, unmarked door. Paul pressed his hand against the scanner, and the door slid open to reveal a compact room filled with communication equipment. "The Alliance doesn't know about this," Diane explained as she quickly activated a console. "Earth insisted on having our own secure communication channel as a condition of joining. They thought we were being paranoid." Paul stood guard at the door while Diane's fingers flew across the alien interface that had been modified with human technology. "Make it quick, Ambassador. I'm picking up movement 2 levels down." "Almost there," Diane muttered. She pulled a small device from her pocket. A quantum entanglement communicator that could send a single burst message regardless of distance or interference. Earth had shared this technology with no one, not even their new allies. The device hummed to life as she connected it to the console. She had time to send one message, one chance to save not just themselves but everyone on the station. "What are you going to say?" Paul asked, checking his weapon. "We need the whole fleet, but they're scattered across the solar system." Diane thought for a moment, then typed in the station's coordinates followed by a single word. "Attacked." She pressed send. The device flashed green once, then went dark, its power source depleted after its one-time use. "Will they understand?" Paul asked as they hurried back toward the shelters. "Captain Frank Simmons will," Diane replied grimly. "And he has standing orders for this exact scenario." They reached the shelter just as the station shook violently. Inside, dozens of diplomats from across the galaxy huddled together in fear. Species that had once been enemies now found comfort in each other's presence as the Vex Horde closed in. "The Vex have boarded on level 5, announced a station security officer, one of the few armed personnel on the diplomatic station. "They'll reach us within 30 minutes. "Why are they doing this?" asked a young Meridian diplomat, his scaled skin pale with fear. "The Vex have never ventured this far into Alliance space." "They're not here for territory," Catharix said quietly. "This is an extinction-level attack. The Vex consume all organic life forms they encounter. They've destroyed 3 unaligned worlds in the past cycle, but we never thought they would dare attack the Alliance directly." The lights flickered as another explosion rocked the station. "Can any of your governments send help?" Diane asked, looking around at the representatives of technologically advanced civilizations. The responses were uniformly grim. The nearest military vessels were hours away at best. The diplomatic station had been placed in neutral territory, far from any heavily defended worlds. "So we're on our own," Paul said, checking how many rounds remained in his weapon. An elderly diplomat from the gaseous Volran species floated forward, his containment suit glowing softly. "I have lived for 322 of your Earth years, young human. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. There is no shame in admitting when the end has come." Diane stood up suddenly. "With all due respect, Ambassador, humans don't accept the end quite so easily." A loud bang echoed through the station, followed by the screeching sound of metal being torn apart. "They've breached level 3, the security officer announced. "We have maybe 15 minutes left." Ambassador Catherix clicked her mandibles nervously. "None of our warships will arrive in time. We are doomed." Paul moved to stand beside Diane, both of them facing the shelter door. "Maybe not," he said quietly. "You don't know humans very well yet." "What do you mean?" Catherix asked, a hint of desperate hope in her voice. Diane checked her watch. "If Captain Simmons received our message and if he follows protocol—" She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in the shelter knew that even if a message had somehow gotten through, no ship could cross interstellar distances quickly enough to save them. As the sounds of destruction grew closer, the aliens began various forms of prayer or meditation. Final rituals from a dozen different worlds. The humans simply waited, their faces set in determined expressions that confused the others. No one expected salvation, least of all from the primitive humans who had barely established their first interstellar colony. No one knew about the USS Defiance or what it could do. No one understood that humans had learned one thing from their violent history: always have a backup plan. And 20 light-years away, Captain Frank Simmons stood on the bridge of humanity's first and only interstellar battleship as it prepared to make history. Captain Frank Simmons stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, humanity's first and only interstellar battleship. Built in secret using technology reverse-engineered from a crashed alien vessel, the Defiance was Earth's insurance policy in a galaxy they barely understood. The message from Ambassador Martinez had arrived just 20 minutes ago. One word: attacked. It was all Frank needed to know. "Status report," Frank demanded, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical display. At 53, he was older than most active captains, but no one knew experimental technology like Frank Simmons. Commander Susan Powell looked up from her station. Her short blonde hair framed a face that rarely showed emotion, but now concern was evident in her eyes. "Jump calculations complete, Captain. But I should remind you we've never tested the warp drive at this distance." "Noted, Commander," Frank replied, his voice steady despite the risk they were about to take. The experimental warp drive was designed to bend space itself, allowing the Defiance to travel faster than any ship in the known galaxy. In theory. Navigation Officer Alan Jackson spoke next. "If the coordinates from Ambassador Martinez are correct, we'll arrive directly in a combat zone." Frank nodded grimly. "The Alliance dismissed us as primitives barely worth trading with. They refused to share defensive technology because they claimed we weren't evolved enough." He stood, addressing the bridge crew. "Let's show them what humanity does when our friends are in danger. Battle stations." The bridge erupted into activity. The massive railguns extended from the Defiance's hull as the engineering crew, led by Chief Engineer Olivia Grant, prepared the experimental warp drive. Weapons Officer Kevin Young calibrated the targeting systems, while Medical Officer Lisa Rodriguez readied the medbay for potential casualties. "Engineering reports ready, Captain," Olivia's voice came through the comm system. "The core is stable, but I can't guarantee it'll stay that way after a jump this big." "Understood," Frank replied. "We only need to get there. We'll worry about getting back afterwards." Susan approached Frank, speaking quietly so only he could hear. "You realize this could be considered an act of war, right?" The Alliance specifically told us not to engage in any military actions without approval. Frank's eyes narrowed. And what should we do? Let the Vex slaughter everyone at that station, including our own people? Susan shook her head. I'm not saying we shouldn't go. I'm saying we should be prepared for the consequences. One problem at a time, Commander, Frank said, returning to his chair. Mr. Jackson, start the countdown. Aye, Captain. Warp jump in 10. The crew braced themselves. No human had ever traveled this far this fast. 5. Frank thought of Diane Martinez. They had served together years ago before she moved to diplomacy. She was smart, capable. If anyone could survive until help arrived, it was her. 3, 2, 1. The universe seemed to bend around them. Stars stretched into lines of light, then vanished altogether as the Defiance entered the warp tunnel. The ship groaned under forces it was never designed to withstand. Hull integrity at 80%, reported Engineering Officer Greg Patterson, his fingers flying over his console to reroute power. 75%. Stay on course, Frank ordered, gripping his chair as the ship shuddered violently. For what seemed like an eternity but was actually only 47 seconds, the Defiance tore through folded space. Then, with a final lurch that threw several crew members to the floor, they burst back into normal space. Status, Frank demanded, helping Susan back to her feet. Hull integrity at 60%, Greg reported. Warp drive is offline. We'll need at least 6 hours to get it back online. Weapons? Frank asked. Kevin Young was already at work. Railguns operational. Missile tubes 1 through 16 ready. Point defense systems online. Tactical. Give me a view of the battle space, Frank ordered. The main view screen flickered to life and the bridge fell silent. The diplomatic station floated in space before them, partially on fire, surrounded by alien vessels with distinctive purple engines. The Vex had already attached boarding craft to the station's hull. Life signs? Frank asked quietly. Communications. Officer Heather Clark worked her console. Reading multiple life signs on the station, but they're faint. The station's life support is failing. And the Vex? 23 ships, Captain, Susan reported. Mostly smaller craft, but I count 3 cruisers. Frank stood, taking in the scene. The Defiance was large by human standards, nearly a kilometer long, but they were still outnumbered. They haven't noticed us yet, Kevin observed. Their sensors must not be looking this far out. Then let's make an entrance they won't forget, Frank said. Target the nearest cruiser. Full spread from railguns 1 through 4. Kevin's fingers danced across his console. Target locked. Fire. The Defiance shuddered as 4 massive tungsten rods accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. On the view screen, the Vex cruiser simply ceased to exist, transformed into an expanding cloud of debris. Now they had the Vex's attention. The alien ships began to turn, energy weapons charging. Incoming fire, Susan called out. Evasive maneuvers, Frank ordered. Pattern Delta, and target those boarding craft. We need to buy the station some time. The Defiance moved with surprising grace for its size, rolling to avoid the first volley of energy weapons. Point defense lasers picked off smaller Vex ships that ventured too close. Sir, Heather said urgently, I'm picking up a transmission from the station. It's Lieutenant Garcia. Put him through, Frank ordered. Paul Garcia's voice came through, distorted by static. Defiance, is that you? Please tell me that's you. Lieutenant, this is Captain Simmons. We're here to help. What's your situation? Bad, sir. The Vex have breached multiple levels. We've got about 60 diplomats in the main shelter, including Ambassador Martinez, but the Vex are getting closer. Life support is failing. Frank nodded to Susan. We're sending a rescue team. Hold tight. He turned to Security Chief Nathan Davis. Chief, prep your teams for boarding action. We need to get those people out. Nathan, a former Marine with a reputation for getting impossible jobs done, nodded. Already on it, sir. Teams 1 through 4 are suiting up. The Defiance rocked as a Vex energy beam grazed their hull. Shields holding at 82%, Greg reported. Frank leaned forward. Mr. Young, deploy countermeasures and prepare the package. Kevin's eyes widened slightly. "The package, sir? Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Frank said firmly. The package was the Defiance's secret weapon, a set of nuclear-tipped missiles. While other species had abandoned such primitive weapons millennia ago in favor of energy-based systems, the Vex would have no defenses against the ancient destructive power of atomic weapons. As the security teams raced to the shuttle bay, Frank watched the Vex ships reorganizing for another attack. He knew the next few hours would determine not just the fate of everyone on that station, but possibly humanity's place in the galaxy. "Let's show them what humanity does best," he said, quietly. "We protect our own and anyone else who needs protecting." The diplomatic station shook violently. Ambassador Diane Martinez steadied herself against a wall as dust fell from the ceiling of the shelter. The frightened diplomats looked up in confusion. "Another attack?" asked Ambassador Catherix, her insect-like mandibles clicking nervously. Paul Garcia checked his tablet. No, that wasn't the Vex. That felt different. Suddenly, the emergency lights flickered, and the display screen on the wall activated by itself. It showed an external view of space, outside the station. The image made the crowded room fall completely silent. A massive ship had appeared near the station. It was unlike any vessel the Alliance diplomats had ever seen, angular and dark with huge gun barrels extending from its hull. It was firing on the Vex ships, and to everyone's shock, the Vex cruiser it targeted simply disappeared in a flash of light. "That vessel configuration?" a Meridian diplomat whispered. "It's human?" Diane and Paul exchanged proud smiles. "That's the USS Defiance," Paul confirmed. "Impossible," said Ambassador Zool, the blue-skinned diplomat. "Humans don't have ships that size. Your largest vessel is the colony transport that brought you to Proxima Centauri." "That's what we wanted you to think," Diane said quietly. The room watched in amazement as the human battleship engaged the Vex fleet. The Defiance moved with surprising speed for its size, avoiding energy beams while firing its massive railguns. When smaller Vex ships got too close, point defense lasers cut them to pieces. "Your species built this weapon?" Ambassador Catherix asked, mandibles quivering in disbelief. Paul nodded. "The Defiance was supposed to remain classified until next year. Looks like we're making an early debut." On the screen, they could see the Defiance taking hits, but its shields held. Another Vex ship exploded as the human vessel launched what appeared to be missiles. "Primitive projectile weapons?" scoffed one of the ambassadors. "The Vex shields will—" The ambassador stopped mid-sentence as the missile detonated, creating an explosion far larger than should have been possible for its size. The blast consumed 3 Vex ships at once. "Was that—" Ambassador Catherix couldn't finish her question. "Nuclear," confirmed Diane. "We figured since everyone else abandoned them long ago, no one would have defenses against them anymore." The shelter's communication system suddenly crackled to life. A woman's voice came, through clear and professional. "Diplomatic station, this is Communications Officer Heather Clark of the USS Defiance. We've engaged the Vex fleet and are preparing rescue operations. Please confirm your location and status." Paul grabbed the comm unit. "Defiance, this is Lieutenant Garcia. We have approximately 60 diplomats in the main shelter on level 2. Life support is failing and the Vex have breached levels 4 and 5. "Understood, Lieutenant. Security teams are launching now. Hold your position." Outside, 4 small craft detached from the Defiance and sped toward the station. The Vex ships tried to intercept them, but the Defiance provided covering fire, drawing most of the enemy attention. "They're coming for us," Diane told the shocked diplomats. "We need to prepare to evacuate." "But the Vex are between us and the docking bays," protested Ambassador Zoll. Paul checked his weapon. "The human security teams will handle that. Everyone needs to gather their essential items only. We'll be leaving in less than 20 minutes. As the diplomats hurriedly collected their things, Ambassador Catherix approached Diane. "Why would your people risk so much for us? Many of the Alliance species voted against giving humans full membership rights." Diane smiled gently. "That's not how humans work, Ambassador. We don't help only those who help us. We help because it's the right thing to do." The station rocked again as something impacted nearby. The lights flickered and then died completely, plunging them into darkness before emergency backup power kicked in. "The Vex have reached level 3, Paul reported grimly. "They're getting closer." Minutes passed in tense silence. They could hear distant sounds of fighting, energy weapons, and something louder, more explosive. The sounds grew closer. "Everyone stay back from the door," Paul ordered, raising his weapon. The door to the shelter slid open. Everyone tensed, but instead of Vex invaders, 4 humans in heavy combat armor entered the room. Their armor was scorched and damaged, but they moved with practiced efficiency. "Lieutenant Garcia? Ambassador Martinez?" The lead soldier called out. "I'm Sergeant Chris Miller, Defiance Security Team 1. Captain Simmons sent us to get you out." Relief washed over the room. Paul stepped forward to meet the security team. "What's the situation out there?" "We've cleared a path to Docking Bay 3, Chris explained. "Teams 2 and 3 are holding the Vex at key junctions. The Defiance is keeping most of the Vex fleet busy, but we need to move fast." Diane addressed the diplomats. "We're leaving. Now. Stay close to the security team and follow their instructions exactly." Ambassador Catherick seemed hesitant. "Some of our species cannot move quickly." Sergeant Miller nodded understandingly. "We brought grav sleds for those who need assistance. No one gets left behind." The evacuation began immediately. The security team arranged the diplomats in a line with 2 soldiers in front and 2 bringing up the rear. They moved through the damaged station, passing signs of fighting, scorch marks on walls, destroyed Vex drones, and occasionally, the body of a fallen Vex soldier. "The Vex were not expecting resistance," one of the security team members explained as they hurried along. "They thought the station was defenseless." They reached a junction where another human security team was exchanging fire with Vex soldiers at the far end of a corridor. The sounds of energy weapons mixed with the louder cracks of human firearms. "That's our path," Chris informed them. "Team 2 will cover us while we cross. Move quickly when I give the signal." Diane watched as the security team coordinated with precise hand signals. When the Vex fire momentarily slackened, Chris shouted, "Now!" Group by group, they rushed across the junction while human soldiers provided covering fire. Ambassador Zool stumbled, and one of the security team members immediately rushed to help him, shielding the alien with her own body as energy bolts flew past. Finally, they reached Docking Bay 3, where 2 shuttlecraft waited, engines running. Outside the station's shields, they could see the battle continuing. The Defiance was still engaging the Vex fleet, drawing fire away from the station. "Ambassador Martinez, your team is on Shuttle 1, Chris directed. "We'll get everyone else." On Shuttle 2. As Diane boarded the shuttle, she looked back at the frightened but now hopeful faces of the alien diplomats. Many of them were seeing humans in a completely new light. The shuttle pilot was already running pre-flight checks. "Ambassador, please, secure yourself. We're leaving as soon as everyone's aboard." Through the viewport, Diane could see the second shuttle loading the remaining diplomats. In the distance, the Defiance fired another nuclear missile at a Vex cruiser, the explosion briefly outshining everything else in space. "I never thought I'd say this," Ambassador Cathorick said, as she settled into a seat next to Diane. "But I'm very glad humans are more dangerous than they appeared." The 2 shuttles broke away from the diplomatic station, engines flaring as they accelerated toward the USS Defiance. Behind them, parts of the station were already breaking apart as life support failed completely. Inside Shuttle 1, Diane Martinez watched through the viewport as the massive human battleship continued to engage the Vex fleet. The Defiance was taking damage now. Its hull showed black scorch marks where enemy weapons had hit, and one of its smaller gun turrets was completely destroyed. "Will your ship survive this?" Ambassador Catherick asked, her mandibles twitching with worry. "The Defiance was built to take punishment," Diane assured her, though privately she shared the concern. The ship had never been tested in actual combat before today. The shuttle pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ambassador, we're being hailed by the Defiance." "Put it through," Diane replied. Captain Frank Simmons's voice filled the small craft. "Diane, glad to see you made it out. We're opening bay doors for your shuttles now. Be advised we're still engaged with enemy forces." "Understood, Frank. Thanks for the rescue." The shuttles approached the underbelly of the massive human ship. A section of the hull slid open, revealing a brightly lit hangar bay. With careful precision, both shuttles glided inside, touching down as the bay doors closed behind them. Security. Teams were waiting as the diplomats disembarked. Medical Officer Lisa Rodriguez directed her staff to help those who needed immediate attention. Ambassador Martinez, Lisa called out. Captain Simmons requests your presence on the bridge. You, too, Lieutenant Garcia. As Diane and Paul followed a crewman toward the bridge, the alien diplomats looked around in amazement at the interior of the human vessel. The Defiance's corridors were stark and utilitarian compared to the elegant design of Alliance ships, but everything showed signs of careful engineering and purpose. Your ship technology is far more advanced than you led the Alliance to believe, Ambassador Zul commented as he walked alongside them. We've learned throughout our history that it's unwise to reveal all your capabilities at once, Diane explained diplomatically. The Defiance has been under development since our first contact with your species. They reached the bridge just as the ship shuddered from another hit. Captain Simmons stood at the center, calmly issuing orders as his crew worked with practiced efficiency. Status report, he demanded. Commander Susan Powell looked up from her station. Shields at 48%. Railguns 1 and 3 are offline. We've used 6 of our special packages. Frank nodded, then turned as Diane and Paul entered. Ambassador Lieutenant, welcome aboard the Defiance. Thank you for the rescue, Captain, Diane said. I don't think anyone expected to see a human warship appear out of nowhere. That was rather the point, Frank replied with a slight smile. He turned to the aliens who had followed them to the bridge. I apologize for the deception, but Earth felt it was necessary to maintain certain insurance policies as we joined the galactic community. The ship rocked again, harder this time. Direct hit on Deck 7, Greg Patterson reported from engineering. Sealing bulkheads now. The Vex are concentrating fire, Kevin Young added, from weapons control. They've figured out we're the biggest threat. Frank turned back to Diane and the alien diplomats. We can discuss politics later. Right now, we need to get you to safety and alert the Alliance about the Vex threat. Our communication systems can bypass their jamming. How? Asked Ambassador Catherix. The Vex disrupted all standard Alliance frequencies. Communications Officer Heather Clark smiled. We don't use standard frequencies. Humans still maintain some very old communication technologies that the Vex don't seem to monitor. Frank directed Diane and the diplomats to a conference room adjacent to the bridge. Ambassador Martinez, please brief our guests on what's happening. I need to focus on getting us out of this alive. As they left the bridge, the ship shuddered again. Alarms blared through the corridors. Breach on Deck 12, came a voice over the intercom. Security teams respond. Paul's hand went to his weapon. They've boarded us. In the conference room, the ship's security chief, Nathan Davis, was already organizing a response. Teams, 4 and 5, get down there now. Check your targets. We have civilians on board. The alien diplomats watched in growing concern as Nathan deployed his teams with quick, precise orders. On the room's display screens, they could see the security feed from Deck 12, where Vex soldiers had cut through the hull and were now advancing into the ship. Should we be worried? Ambassador Zul asked. Nathan shook his head. No, sir. We've trained for this. On the screens, they watched as human security teams engaged the Vex boarders. The aliens used energy weapons that left scorch marks on the walls, while the humans countered with a combination of projectile weapons and close-quarters combat tactics. Your species fights like the ancient warriors of my homeworld, Ambassador, Catherix noted with newfound respect. We had forgotten such determination. The Vex soldiers moved with mechanical precision, but the humans adapted quickly, using the ship's corridors and maintenance shafts to outflank them. When a Vex soldier got past their defenses, one of the humans engaged it directly, grappling with the alien despite being outmatched in size and strength. Private Sam Riley, Nathan identified the soldier, former wrestling champion. They watched as Sam managed to disable the Vex soldier by damaging something in its neck, then quickly retreated as his teammates provided covering fire. Impressive, conceded Ambassador Zul. Most Alliance species would consider such direct combat barbaric. Sometimes barbaric is exactly what you need, Diane replied. The ship rocked again, and the lights flickered momentarily. On the bridge, they could hear Captain Simmons giving new orders. Engineering reports the warp drive is back online, Heather announced, entering the conference room. Captain is preparing to jump us out of here once we've cleared the borders. What about the remaining Vex ships? Paul asked. We've destroyed most of them, Heather replied, but their reinforcements will arrive soon. We need to reach Alliance space and warn them. Diane turned to the alien ambassadors. This is bigger than just one attack. If the Vex have changed their strategy to target Alliance core worlds, every species is at risk. Ambassador Catherick stepped forward. We must establish communication with the Alliance Defense Council immediately. Heather nodded. We're working on it. Our systems can bypass the Vex jamming, but we need to get further from their remaining ships. On the security feeds, they could see the human teams had contained the Vex borders. Nathan directed his people, with calm efficiency, sealing off sections of the ship and systematically eliminating the intruders. The last borders are cornered in Cargo Bay 6, he reported. We'll have them cleared in 5 minutes. Diane watched the faces of the alien diplomats as they observed the humans in action. There was a new respect in their eyes, perhaps even a hint of awe. The Alliance had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers to the galactic stage, but now they were seeing another side of humanity, resourceful, determined, and formidable when threatened. I believe, Ambassador Catherick said quietly, that the Alliance has significantly underestimated your species. Diane nodded. It's a common mistake. Throughout our history, humans have often been underestimated, usually to the regret of those who made that error. The ship's intercom activated with Captain Simmons's voice. All hands, prepare for warp jump in 2 minutes. Security report status. Nathan pressed a button on the console. Borders contained, Captain. We're ready when you are. Good work, Frank replied. Ambassador Martinez, please inform our guests that we'll be jumping to Alliance space shortly. It might get a bit rough. As the diplomats secured themselves for the jump, Diane could see that the tide was turning, not just in this battle, but in humanity's standing among the stars. 3 weeks after the battle at Diplomatic Station 7, representatives from all 17 Alliance species gathered in an unlikely location, Earth. The United Nations General Assembly Hall in New York had been modified to accommodate various alien physiologies, higher oxygen levels for some, lower gravity seating for others, and specialized translation systems for all. The USS Defiance orbited overhead, visible to the naked eye as a bright star in the daylight sky. It had become a symbol that humans around the world pointed to with pride. Captain Frank Simmons, now promoted to Admiral, stood beside Ambassador Diane Martinez as they waited for the session to begin. Both wore formal military and diplomatic uniforms respectively, decorated with new medals created specifically to honor those who had fought in what was now called the Battle of Diplomatic Station 7. Nervous? Frank asked quietly. Diane smiled. A little. 3 weeks ago they thought we were primitive newcomers barely worth trading with. Today they're all sitting in our house, asking for our help. Amazing what showing up with a big gun can do for diplomatic relations, Frank replied with a wry smile. The hall quieted as Supreme Counselor Jax of the Meridian Confederation approached the podium. As the current head of the Alliance Council, it fell to him to address the assembly. People of Earth, honored representatives, Jax began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into perfect English. For centuries, the Alliance viewed younger species as protectorates to be guided slowly into galactic society. We believed our technological superiority made us responsible for your gradual development. Frank and Diane exchanged glances. This was what humans had suspected all along. The Alliance had been deliberately keeping Earth from advancing too quickly. The actions of the USS Defiance and its crew have demonstrated that our approach was flawed, Jax continued. Humanity brought different perspectives and unconventional tactics that proved crucial against the Vex. What we saw as primitive weapons were devastatingly effective against an enemy that had evolved defenses only against our advanced technology. Murmurs filled the hall as Jax paused, letting his words sink in. Behind him, Ambassador Cathoric stood with the other Alliance representatives who had been rescued from the station. Many still bore physical and psychological scars from the attack. "The Vex have retreated for now," Jack said, "but our intelligence suggests they are regrouping. They will return stronger and more prepared. The Alliance alone cannot stand against them." Jax gestured toward Frank and Diane. Humanity demonstrated something we had forgotten: the willingness to act decisively in the face of danger, to risk everything to save others, even those who had not always treated them as equals. On the large screens around the hall, footage from the battle played. The USS Defiance appearing from warp, its railguns firing, the nuclear missiles detonating among the Vex fleet. Then came scenes from inside the ship: human security teams fighting off Vex boarders, medics treating injured aliens, engineers working frantically to repair damaged systems. "For too long, the Alliance has rested on its technological achievements," Jax admitted. "We became complacent. We forgot that true strength comes not from having the most advanced weapons, but from the will to use whatever means necessary to protect others." Jax raised all four of his hands in a traditional meridian gesture of deep respect. "Today I propose a new treaty, one that recognizes Earth not as a protectorate, but as a full military ally of the Galoran Alliance." The hall erupted in applause and various alien sounds of approval. Many of the human delegates looked stunned. Just months ago, Earth had been begging for even minor technology-sharing agreements. Now they were being offered a full alliance. As the noise died down, Jax outlined the details. Human shipyards would begin constructing vessels using a combination of Alliance and Earth technologies, creating a hybrid fleet that incorporated the strengths of all species. Alliance worlds would open their universities and research facilities to human scientists, and Earth would share its unique military traditions with Alliance defense forces. Most importantly, Jax concluded, we will no longer hide behind diplomatic niceties when facing existential threats. The Alliance has been at peace for so long that we forgot how to fight. Humanity remembers. And we need that memory now, more than ever. As the formal proceedings continued, Frank slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the New York skyline. Diane found him there a few minutes later. "Quite a change from 3 weeks ago," she said, joining him at the railing. Frank nodded. "I keep wondering if we did the right thing, revealing the Defiance like that." "Having second thoughts about saving an entire diplomatic station?" Diane asked with a raised eyebrow. "No, not about that. But we showed our hand earlier than planned. The Defiance was supposed to remain our secret advantage." Diane leaned against the railing. "And now it's going to be the template for a whole new fleet. I'd say that worked out pretty well." Frank was quiet for a moment, watching as alien diplomats mingled with human officials in the garden below. "Do you think they finally understand us now?" Diane considered the question. "Not entirely, but they're beginning to see that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology." She gestured to the diverse crowd below. "It's our ability to act when action is needed, to fight for others even when nobody expects us to show up." Inside, the Alliance representatives were signing the new treaty. Earth was now officially recognized as a full military ally, with all the respect and responsibility that entailed. In the following months, human vessels joined Alliance patrol fleets throughout the galaxy. The Defiance, repaired and upgraded, with Alliance technology, led the first joint task force into the border regions where the Vex had been spotted. Alliance ships began flying with human officers on board, learning tactics and perspectives from their newest allies. The Vex horde retreated to the edges of known space, facing a united front they hadn't anticipated. And throughout Alliance territory, a new saying emerged among spacers of all species. When systems went dark, or distress calls went unanswered, when hope seemed lost against overwhelming odds, someone would invariably say, "Listen for the roar of human engines through the void. They'll come when no one else will." Aboard the Defiance, now leading a fleet of 20 ships including vessels, from 6 different Alliance species, Admiral Frank Simmons stood on his bridge and issued a simple order: "Let's go to work." The human battleship accelerated, its powerful engines indeed roaring through the void, and behind it followed the united ships of a stronger, more determined alliance, one that had learned the value of human determination and the importance of never leaving anyone behind. As they jumped to warp, heading toward a distant world under threat, Frank thought of all the skeptics who had questioned the need for ships like the Defiance. They had argued that in a peaceful galaxy, humanity had no need of warships. Frank knew better. Peace wasn't maintained by good intentions alone. Sometimes it took the unexpected arrival of those willing to fight when fighting was necessary, to stand up when others could not. Sometimes it took humanity,